much for having me here today. Appreciate the invitation to come here and talk a little bit about Berlitz, what we do, how we do it. Berlitz is basically the premier language training institute in the world. We're broken into three major divisions, the first being language training. We also have an interpretation division and a publication and translation division. Berlitz has been around since 1878. We were founded over 100 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island, and this 100 years has given us the experience to know what to do and how to do it. Literally, Berlitz is using a proven method, a time-proven method. We have a worldwide network of resources with over 300 language centers in 30 countries around the world. These 30 language centers give us the resources to constantly update and modernize all that which we need to do regarding language training, interpreting skills, and translations and publications. Berlitz gives definitely the most up-to-date techniques and materials available in the world today regarding these three divisions. In fact, most Fortune 500 companies use Berlitz. Also, typical consumers use Berlitz, as well as people coming into the United States. Sometimes the fallacy is that Berlitz only teaches foreign languages, but in fact, English is the language we're teaching the most of to those individuals coming into the U.S. In order to learn English, vacation, whatever. Berlitz uses a secret method, basically, in its success. That method is time travel, time trained, and it regards the same way we learn to speak our first language. First listening, then repeating, and then speaking. We use no translation, no grammar rules, and it's a lot of fun. If you have fun doing it, that's the way you're actually going to learn the language and the way you're going to profit from the Berlitz experience. Berlitz actually uses a conversational approach. With a conversational approach, you learn to speak the way you learned your native language. First by listening, speaking, and then repeating. In this way you acquire practical skills, not skills such as those that you learned perhaps in your high school class, wherein you sat, memorized, regurgitated the same old verb forms over and over again, but rather you have a situation where you're actually learning things that are going to apply to your day-to-day situation. The Berlitz method is actually very fast, in the sense that from the moment you enter Berlitz, you're actually using the language that you were going to learn, nothing else. No English, no translation, hence you're going to have an immediate impact in the language learning. Also, the method is actually very effective. With translation having been eliminated, you go right to the source language and you get right to the point, satisfy your need, and you can move on and start doing what you need to do. Also, the complete difference between the Berlitz training method and actual high school, university, other language training methods is the factor of the fun. You can't do something, you cannot learn if you're not having a good time, not enjoying yourself. With Berlitz, with no dull grammar rules, no tedious translation, you have no memorization to bore you either. This gives you an enjoyable experience, something a little different than you might have had when you first went to high school and tried that first Spanish class. Also, Berlitz uses a teamwork approach. Typically, people feel that when they're learning a language, they've always had one instructor, and they need to learn only from one person. This is actually going to be a deterrent to language learning because, in fact, you'll end up mimicking one person, understanding only that person when you go to the foreign country that you're visiting, and you'll only be able to speak to that person. With Berlitz, we actually use a teamwork approach in that we're supplying a number of instructors, giving you different voices, accents, and speech patterns. In this way, you'll be able to understand numbers of people rather than just your high school teacher, basically, when you go to Spain. Actually, in many cases, Berlitz has instructors that are from all the countries that they're representing. In other words, we do not use the typical American certified teacher in the public school system to teach you a foreign language, but rather you end up learning a foreign language from a native speaker. In this way, you're mimicking someone who's speaking the language correctly, you're listening, and you're repeating the language correctly. When you speak with proper pronunciation, hear, and repeat, you'll be understood. Also, the instructors are actually using natural, correct grammar. You're here, speaking, and repeating with correct grammar. In this way, you won't be misunderstood. Again, Berlitz is teaching a real language, the way the language is spoken today. Not really a Shakespearean version, but a language that is constantly changing and a language that we're bringing to you in an updated and modern fashion. At Berlitz, you're learning to communicate in today's language. All our instructors are well educated. They have college level equivalencies in their countries, and they bring to Berlitz backgrounds from anywhere from engineering, business, education. In this way, we can supply all the needs possible for today's modern, updated versions that we need to approach. For example, some people don't like to just come in and learn language for the sake of a trip. They might need engineering skills when they go down to their country. We have many computer-related fields coming in now. Wide, expansive areas of China have now opened up and are supplying technical skills in those areas in computer engineering. If you have somebody that only knows how to teach a language and has no other background, that's all you're going to learn about. Brother Berlitz is at least supplying some technical vocabulary that we incorporate into the learning situation. We're making the programs flexible enough so that whether you are just going on a trip to Paris or going over to negotiate a deal, you have the vocabulary that's going to apply to that given situation. Also, all instructors go through pre-employment training. They go through current, updated employee training throughout their tenure with Berlitz, constantly giving them better skills, updated skills, bringing them back to more situations where they can have better vocabulary to work with the students that they're involved with. As Berlitz is constantly updating and the world needs are constantly updating, so are our instructors. In fact, most of the instructors have backgrounds that will relate to many situations as well as basic needs. All the programs that we have at Berlitz are going to be not just be classroom situations using oral situations, but rather we also provide reinforcement materials should somebody have a need to reacquire the skills and most importantly to review and refresh the skills throughout their tenure as a student with Berlitz. We have audiovisual materials, multimedia materials consisting of cassettes and text that can actually save 25% review time as a student at Berlitz. The more homework you do ultimately, the better you're going to get, and these are the materials that are going to provide you with those skills. Also, the multimedia materials are constantly updated to provide better comprehension. You learn to listen to someone without the benefit of actually seeing them. The whole basis of this method is to acquire language skills without the visual crutch. In other words, if you have a situation where you need to see the written word, as we're constantly trained throughout our upbringing, you'll always need to see the written word, and you'll end up having to travel to Paris with your dictionary constantly in hand. In this way, these materials are actually letting you listen constantly on your own should you have a commute, should you have 45 minutes of free time a night, and in that way, you learn to listen to someone without the benefit of a visual need. Also, if anybody's ever tried speaking on the telephone in a foreign language, this can sometimes be the most difficult thing because you lose the benefit of the person in front of you. 50 to 65% of communication is visual communication, whether it's gesticulations, voice intonation. If you have somebody in front of you and you don't speak a foreign language, it's much easier to understand what's happening than if you've ever tried to pick up a phone and make a long-distance call. That can sometimes be the most frustrating thing, and it's a thing we ultimately all have to do because whether you're making a hotel reservation or negotiating business, you're going to end up having to pick up the phone at some point. The use of the materials provides the ability to not have a person in front of you, not have that visual need. Also, when the program ends and your life as a student at Berlitz, hopefully it never ends, but if it should you do have these cassettes to ultimately maintain, review, and reinforce your language learning. Basically, Berlitz teaches in three primary fashions. First, we have individual instruction, in which a student has one-on-one intensive instruction. Basically, this instruction works on the premise that if there's nobody else in the learning situation, you're getting 50% speaking time and 50% listening comprehension time. This gives you a 100% learning situation, and it's probably the fastest way that Berlitz can actually teach in a given 45-minute to 7.5-hour period, which are the lengths of the classes. something on a one-on-one basis, you'll ultimately be able to reinforce, review, move at your own pace, and control the flexibility of your program by scheduling these situations anytime you would need to. Other situations that we have are also semi-private situations where you're actually sharing the learning situation with a secondary